Hello and welcome to this installment of videos for Bio 153. In these videos where we are going to be talking about cardiac physiology, the heart. And in this particular video, we are going to be going over the anatomy of the heart. Okay, so first of all, let's just start with the position of the heart. The heart lies in the thoracic cavity. So the thoracic cavity is the cavity that is above the diaphragm. So the diaphragm's right here. This is the thoracic cavity. It is somewhat cone shaped with like a point at the bottom and kind of pointing to the left. That point is called the apex. The heart itself is lies a little bit to the left side of our bodies, okay? The heart is surrounded by a tough membrane called the pericardium. And the pericardium sort of functions to protect the heart and also to offer some lubrication. So the pericardium is filled with fluid to minimize friction between the heart and surrounding structures. Okay. All right, so we've already talked about this, but I want to remind you that the heart has 4 chambers. We have 2 atria on the top, the right atrium and the left atrium. We have 2 ventricles on the bottom, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. I also just want to remind you again that we are using the right and left of the patient or the subject when we refer to these chambers of the heart. Okay. There is a wall that separates the right heart from the left heart to separate the oxygenated from the deoxygenated blood. And also, what else do I want to say? The heart is made mostly of muscle. Okay, so you can kind of see these walls of the heart are very thick. They're made up of this cardiac muscle, and it makes sense that the heart is made of muscle because that reflects the job of the heart, right? So the heart muscle contracts in order to propel blood through our cardiovascular system, okay? And I also just kind of want you to notice that the ventricles are more muscular than the atria because, again, reflecting that function, the ventricles are going to be pumping the blood a much farther distance, either to the rest of the body or to the lungs, as opposed to the atria, which are just pumping the blood down to the ventricles. Okay. All right. We also went over this before, but this is a more sort of anatomically accurate depiction of the major blood vessels. So I just want to remind you of these major blood vessels. We've got the aorta, which carries blood out from the left ventricle to the rest of the body. That blood is going to return to the heart through the vena cava. So we have one on top, which is called the superior vena cava, and then this one on the bottom, which is called the inferior vena cava. That blood is going to go through the right atrium, right ventricle. Then it's going to go to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery branches into left and right to go to the 2 lungs, okay? Blood is going to return to the heart through the left pulmonary veins, through the pulmonary veins, of which we have left and right, which is not shown here. And it's going to come back in through the left ventricle, left atrium to the left ventricle, okay? I also want to remind you that, I want to point out that the heart itself is a tissue, it's a muscle, it's going to need its own blood supply, it's going to need its own oxygen so that it can power its own pumping, okay? And the way it gets that oxygen is via the coronary artery and vein. So this is the blood supply to the heart. A heart attack is the result of a blockage of the coronary artery or or like a branch of the coronary artery. So that can be really serious. You block that blood flow to the heart or to part of the heart. That part of the heart isn't going to get its oxygen. That muscle isn't going to be able to do its contracting, and then you lose functionality there. And also, I should point out, cardiac muscle can't regenerate. So once it dies, that's it. That part of the heart is dead. That tissue is dead. Okay. Okay. In the heart, we have valves to prevent the backflow of blood. Before I introduce you to those valves, I want to just sort of orient you to this figure right here, right? So what we're looking at on the left is what you would see if you cut through the heart longitudinally along this plane. Okay, so that's what you're looking at down here. And then on the right is what you would see if you cut transversely, so kind of horizontal like this. Yeah, this is kind of like a top-down view of the valves. Okay, we have two sets of valves. So each set of valves there are two valves in each set of valves. We have the atrioventricular valves that lie between the atrium and the ventricle. And again, like I said, there's two of them, right? So we have a left AV valve, which is called the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. And then we have a right atrioventricular valve, which is called the tricuspid valve. Don't worry about these specific names, as long as you know the term AV valve. Okay, so, and then in this view, you can only see one, just the left AV valve. So those are our AV valves. Our second set of valves lies between the ventricle and the major blood vessel that it's going to pump blood out to. Okay, so looking at this figure here, we've got one valve, the semilunar, the aortic semilunar valve, which is going to lie between the left ventricle and the aorta. And then we have this one, the pulmonary semilunar valve, which is going to lead from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. Okay. Semilunar valves have their name. They get their name because they look like half moons in some way. That's not really clear to me, but that's where they get their name from.